section is looking at measures of the spread. Now, when we talked about the measures of center, like the mean and median, it's where was the middle? What is kind of a typical number in this list? When we talk about the spread, we care about not what is typical, but how far spread apart the numbers are. So if you were looking at the free throw data that we were using before, what we care about is not how many the typical person makes. We don't care if that's 16 or 18 or whatever it is. We care about how wide the distribution is. Is it, well, some people are really good and some people are really bad? Or is everyone really, really close to each other? Is everyone really close to the average? That's what the spread tells us, is how far apart these different numbers are in our list. Three major measures of spread. One is the range, the second is the interquartile range, and the third is the standard deviation. The range is the distance between the largest and the smallest. You take your biggest number, your max, and you subtract your min. So the range is the biggest to the smallest. The interquartile range is a similar idea, but instead of going from the biggest number to the smallest number, the max to the min, it goes from the third quartile to the first quartile. So instead of going from the very, very ends, which sometimes the very ends of a list could be really, really big or really, really small outliers, numbers that are really far away from the other ones, the interquartile range is usually a little bit more protected from those crazy numbers on the ends. So interquartile range is another measure of how far things are spread apart. And then finally, standard deviation. And what that does is it figures out how far away each number falls from the mean and kind of finds the average. So unlike range, which only really uses your two numbers, your max and your min, or your IQR, your interquartile range, which only uses your third and first quartile, the standard deviation actually uses every number in its formula to help calculate the spread. So let's look at this example here. So using that free throw data from the previous problems, where we had a minimum of 4, our lowest number was 4, first quartile of 11, median of 16, third quartile of 19, and max of 20, and that's all from when we did our box plot and 5-number summary earlier. You can find the range, IQR, and standard deviation. The range is going to go the highest number minus the lowest number. So 24 minus 4, and so the range is going to be 20. The reason you like to know the range generally is if you know that the range goes from 4 to 24, that it's 20 wide, it can help you make a graph. It gives you a sense of how many you can plan for on the low end and how many to plan for on the high end. So the range is generally useful for a lot of things. The IQR, we have the third quartile and the first quartile, so 19 and 11. And 19 minus 11 is going to be 8. So our interquartile range, or IQR, is 8. And what it tells you is how spread apart the middle 50% is. And if you're wondering, well, the middle 50%, what do you mean by that? Let's look at our 5-number summary. The 0% at the very bottom, and you have 100% at the very top. And that would mean 50% in the middle. Your first quartile, your first quarter, or 25%, is right here. And your third quartile, or 75%, would be right here. When you go from the first quartile to the third quartile, you're going from 25 to 75%. This represents a total of 50%, the middle 50%. Because out on this side you've got 25, and out on this side you've got 25, and then in the middle you've got 50%. So the IQR tells you how spread apart that middle 50% is, and it ignores all the really big numbers and all the really small numbers. The last one is standard deviation. Now, using the numbers that are shown just in this section, you actually couldn't calculate standard deviation. You need every single number in your list. So we're going to have to go back to the previous section where we have the full list right here from 4 all the way up to 24, and we put all these numbers in our calculator in our list, just like we did when we wanted to find the mean earlier, and we used x bar to find the mean. To find the standard deviation, we're going to use this symbol right here. It's called sigma, but it looks like an O with a little tail on it. So sigma x. So that's going to be our standard deviation. So we're going to write that number down here. So 5.3 we'll round it off to in this case. 5.3. You're never going to calculate standard deviation by hand. Standard deviation is a very complicated formula that will give you a massive headache. So you're always just going to want to trust your calculator to take care of that one for you. And those are your measures of spread.